This is EF Outbound, a podcast that showcases transformative travel stories that defy our expectations, challenge our assumptions, and teach us something new about the world and ourselves. I'm executive producer Megan Martineau, and I'll be your host on this adventure.
There's a mystifying coolness in this meadow camp, La Compartición, base camp for the highest peak in the Caribbean, Pico Duarte. Wow, so this must have been like, this was right before I realized he was gone.
After college, Ekow felt the need to give back to the world. He loved travel and adventure, and he decided to join the Peace Corps. It took months to complete the application process, and then he got a letter that he was accepted and would be serving in the Dominican Republic.
I remember that on the letter that said, like, congratulations, there's this awesome photo of these couples dancing merengue in this really vibrantly colored clothing. I was like, okay, they have a good time in the DR. This is going to work out fantastic. I didn't have too many specific expectations. Other than that, I would be doing my best to fulfill whatever my project was and was open to learn from the people that would be receiving me in their community. You know, I was ready for an adventure, whatever that may be.
Ekow has a degree in environmental studies and found out he'd be working in the Central Mountain Range, supporting the work of the DR's National Environmental School.
The origin of the school, I think, is actually pretty interesting. In the 60s, when the DR started getting serious about reforestation, in collaboration with the U.S. Forest Service and some other international environmental and agricultural type institutions, they realized that they were lacking in trained foresters. And so the school was initially founded as a technical forestry school. But a few years before I started my work with Peace Corps, they changed the curriculum purview to be a more general environmental education. All the students that are at the school are on full scholarships. They come from all around the DR, which is super neat because it gives students who really otherwise wouldn't have any chance an opportunity to change their situation. So I started off teaching the ecotourism class. I was helping out with English classes, and that was kind of straightforward. But 10 months into my service, when they asked me to teach the general ecology course, that definitely seemed like much more of a challenge to me. At first, I felt, conflicted. I was like, am I the person to teach this class? I wouldn't be able to teach a course at a college in the United States. And so I struggled with that a little bit, but I also was just trying to be open to what these people were asking me to do, right? I was a guest in their community. They're saying, we think you are the person to teach this class. And I was seeing the challenge of the lack of faculty.
At the time, Ekow was 23 years old, and the students he was teaching were in college, very close to his own age. He knew some Spanish, but he quickly realized that the Spanish you learn in school is very different than the Spanish you use to teach, especially something as technical as ecology. So I asked him, what did the students think of you?
I think that they liked me. I really do. There were moments when I doubted it, because you had to toe a funny line. I think that I had success with integrating into that school community because I approached it as humbly as I could. I knew it was ridiculous. I knew my pronunciation was bad, especially with some of these technical terms. But I would just do my best to laugh along with them when they were making fun of me in the class, which happened. As I would probably have made fun of my teacher if they didn't know how to say some topic correctly and they're trying to teach me. I can remember one of my students actually made a recording of me griping in the classroom because, they were just going nuts or whatever. I'm trying to teach a class. And I think I said like, no me gusta esto, but like much more like, no me gusta esto or something, like with a pretty poor accent. So he recorded it and mixed it and made this little rap. And so one day I'm like coming into the cafeteria and the kids were all dancing around and I hear my voice like, no me gusta esto, no me gusta esto, no me gusta esto. Like, I'm like, what is going on? I'm like, oh, they made you a rap. I'm like, oh my God, I'm literally the clown. So that was my life. But honestly, I mean, between the students and the faculty, we developed really fond relationships because everyone lived there. It was a small community. And we were all sort of getting through this clearly not very comfortable existence together. I mean, it was great, but there were definitely moments when I wasn't comfortable because, the water system was very inconsistent, and there'd be days where you had to be doing field work, so you're super sweaty, but you couldn't shower. And there were times when the funding was very thin, so the food's quality started to deteriorate. Oh my God, I remember there was this one dinner we would have sometimes. It was mollejas. It was chicken gizzards. Just a bowl of chicken gizzards. Gets to the point where you don't even think about how it tastes, just like slurp it down, Anyway, point being, through those experiences, I think we all had eventually established pretty strong relationships amongst the faculty and the students. I was convinced that the only way that I could do right by these students enrolled in an ecology course was to include field studies, especially because this is a technical college. And we didn't have any money. I didn't have any money at school. I didn't have any money. No one had any money. So I was like, okay, well, how are we going to do that? My colleagues at the school were like, yeah, I mean, we're open to the idea for sure. We've done similar things in the past. So, try to get creative. So I did. I got sort of creative. I applied for a patchwork of different sources of funding from the U.S. and a couple other places. And we were able to make it work under the auspices that we also discuss safe sex. And we got to visit a number of these great national parks and explore different ecosystems as part of this course. We visited, for example, a mangrove forest in the north of the island, and also did training about HIV/AIDS education with the local park guards there. And we visited a more sort of arid desert ecosystem in the south of the island. We're talking about how to take GPS measures. We're also talking about the 3 C's of safe sex. But the real pinnacle of the course and of the field studies was the study on the mountainous ecosystem, which is on this mountain called Pico Duarte, which is actually the highest mountain in the Caribbean. And it's a super cool place to visit in an ecology class because essentially as you sort of ascend in altitude, you get to see lots of different habitats. But also it was just gonna be a fun trip because it was gonna be the whole class and we had to do overnights. And it was a major operation. All the faculty were involved in coordinating the logistics.
The hike starts not far from the school, in a town called La Cienega.
You had to get all the pack mules situated. Everyone had their backpacks on and that kind of stuff. As part of our safety procedures, we had all the students were divided up into different groups. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And in each group, everyone had a role. The person was in the front of the group, people in the middle of the group, and the sweeper and all that kind of stuff. When you start off, it's a mix between Caribbean, alpine, and a typical sort of subtropical ecosystem. So you could imagine a mix of ferns, some fruiting trees as well, tall grasses, and things like that. It feels quite muggy when you're starting off. And then as you start to ascend, that kind of the diversity of the species that you're seeing drops, and you start seeing almost exclusively more of the alpine species, which is kind of interesting. Actually, it's quite cold. There's no snow, but it is cold. And the water, for example, gets to be really frigid.
Because they started in late afternoon, the class only hiked a few hours before they set up camp for the night. The second day of the hike was all about getting to a camp called La Comparticion, which is Pico Duarte's base camp. This is a little unusual, but base camp on Pico Duarte is actually close to the peak. So after they arrived, they got everything ready in order to reach the summit in the morning.
The vibe is like really good. Everyone's excited, kind of making bonfires, playing these wacky games and stuff. And everyone's feeling really good.
Until
day 3, we get up bright and early, and we hike up in our groups up to the peak. And that's super cool. You hike up these little switchbacks. It gets to be quite steep. You go through this little valley called the Valley of Lili. And it's this weird depression. And there it's like particularly cold. Remember that. And then it's sort of like the final ascent, and you can sort of sense that you're close to the top, and everyone's feeling great. Some people are trying to take off a little quicker. And then you get to the peak, and it's an amazing view. Pinks and purples and all different colors. And you can see on one side it's like quite rugged, on the other side it sort of feels a little more pastoral. You can see all the way down towards like a big valley there. And there's a big statue of Duarte, who's like this big figure in Dominican history. At that point, one of my colleagues said, okay, great, like we all made it here. Now we're gonna do our part. And on the way down, he handed out garbage bags. On the way down, everyone, you're gonna look and see if you find any garbage. And then, we'll all meet up back at the camp, have some lunch. From there, head to the Valley of Los Teteros, which is an awesome, super mystical place. There's carvings from the indigenous peoples of the DR, the Tainos, on some of the rocks there. There's this beautiful river. You can see parrots flying, some of these horses and stuff. It's really cool.
the students and faculty made their way back down to the base camp, working individually and in teams to pick up trash along the way. When they got back, Ekow wrote a beautiful passage in his journal.
It started off in Spanish. It says, Subí al Pico Duarte hoy con los estudiantes de mi clase de ecología. So I climbed Pico Duarte today with the students from my ecology class. There's a mystifying coolness in this meadow camp, La Comparticion, base camp for the highest peak in the Caribbean, Pico Duarte, at 3,087 meters. The meadow is green with little cloves and speckled white with patches of fluffy clover heads, sparse patches of sand where the pack horses and mules are tied to trees. The camp is a longhouse where the hikers can lay down their mats. There are 2 cabins for the guides and park guards. There's a long wooden kitchen with a large cement fogon, space for 8 pots to boil, and an opening in the roof, frosted over with ash where the smoke escapes. There's a breeze that pulls you into the distance of the long view spreading out from this mountain perch beyond the pale green ridge of pines and bushy grasses, still in the slow recovery from a forest fire in 2005, out to the blue ridge on the horizon. There are vines and shapes of shadows cast by the pines right here in the camp, funny bushy-top pines that have self-pruned their lower branches. There are 4 horses munching in the clover. There are bees buzzing in the clover as well. 3 of my students, Johnsley, Moise, and Santos, are shooting the shit on the edge of the meadow. 25 minutes ago, I took the most heavenly outdoor bucket bath. I was unsure at first, but I really stunk, and decided that the cold bathing was an integral part of the experience. It was actually like a little after lunchtime. We're supposed to head out to the valley, and we can't find one of the students. Where is Rainier? At first, all the logical things come to mind. Like, okay, well, where could he be? Is he off taking a dip in the river? Is he just on his own? Well, there's a million things that could be going on. So you kind of cover all the logical explanations first. And we did. We covered all the logical explanations. At that point, it was like, okay, he's clearly nowhere that he should be, reasonably. I'm a little bit nervous. I'm worried. I'm perplexed. It's like it was totally perplexing. Because the trail between the base camp and the peak of the mountain is like very clear. We hiked at like 11 a.m., bright and sunny at that point, and we're all adults. So, it's perplexed, but more it was just like, okay, a sense of urgency. Let's figure out what's going on here. So we teamed up, and we started our little search parties to go hike all the way back up to the peak again. We do that, come back down, and there's still no sign of this guy. We knew that he got to the top of the mountain because we all went up in our teams. And we knew he'd heard the directions of what the plan was, and that we were in our groups. But then, it was wild because only a few hours had passed, and already, like, people's memories of what had happened were diverging. And it's like, okay, well, there's a truth to something that happened, and now there's already, a number of different accounts. So, like, how do you get to find out what the truth actually was, And so trying to figure that and dealing with, obviously, the emotions, but also mostly just trying to make rational decisions in this, like, pretty urgent time.
Peace Corps has an emergency line that Ekow was trying to call, but there was no cell service that high up on the mountain. And as they were looking for Rainier, a thick fog rolled in, rendering all the radios useless as well.
We sent one of the guides that was with us, right, because you had to have guides who were sort of manning the mules that were carrying some of the luggage. We sent him to the next stop where we were planning to go, under the off chance that for some reason this student had decided to go on his own. At this point, everyone's getting pretty distraught, understandably so. But when it really hit was, I think it was like right around dinner time, when it was just straight up dark and it started to rain. And the guide came back, and there was no sign of this kid. I just had no idea what to do. I just didn't know. There's like this, space of light that we're in. There's like room of light around the bonfire. And then beyond that is this like clear sort of curtain of darkness. And that's where he is. It's like this like pitch black wall of darkness. And so like in your mind, it's just thinking here's like one of our friends in our college. He's out there. And I wouldn't want to be out there without a proper jacket and all other kind of things. No, he had basic stuff that he would have had for the day hike. Some snacks, maybe a light jacket. But up in the top of the mountain, we're talking like 10,000 feet, roughly. Especially with the elements, with the rain coming down. It was cold. It's cold and a hard place to be in. All kinds of things are going through everyone's mind. At that moment, I was like, this is very real. This is very, very real. Even though Peace Corps is like a multi-year experience, the fact that it has like a beginning and an end to it in your mind, I think that reduces the stakes of how substantial that experience is in relation to the rest of your life. I had never contemplated that it was possible that there was, something that I could do that could have a very clear, obvious negative outcome. Rainier was definitely one of our best students at the school. Always at the top of his class, but also quiet and like a little bit aloof. You know when people who've got like a lot going on, but they're very sort of introspective and a little insular, you can really tell. He's like one of those guys who's like, come on, share what's going on in there. And he often didn't. And I remember he asked me specifically if he could skip out on the trip. I guess he had a girlfriend from the U.S. that was visiting or something like that, so he didn't want to be there. But he had to stick around. He had to come. It was like a requirement for the course. Weird gossip starting to go around, and that, I don't know, didn't sit very well with me. And the only thing I could think was to like propose we continue with like another corny educational activity to talk about like safe sex or something like that. It's like, should we do the activity? That's all. And that was the plan. I was like, let's just stick to the plan. I remember one of my other students, Isabel, came up to me, and I was just so struck with her wisdom in this moment. She was like, I think, she came to me kind of quietly, I think what really is most appropriate right now is like we need to pray. I was like, all right. I kind of took a back seat. The group kind of gathered around, in a circle. Everyone kind of like held hands and said a prayer. So everyone kind of went to bed feeling pretty somber.
The next day was even more serious. The radio signal was still weak, but Ekow knew they had to get in touch with the base in La Cienega, so he assigned a group of students to man it.
It's like a wind-up radio thing that you have to crank to give it energy and that you can use to reach the base.
Calling base from La Competición. Calling, copy. Do you copy me?
And the fog was just so thick that we could barely break through, and it was cloudy, so that was disrupting the signal as well. And so it was like we were waiting to see if the fog would move out, if the clouds would change. Eventually they heard back. They heard from the base that the office was going to send up some professional search parties to join us that night.
The search party made it up the mountain by early evening, and Ekow was relieved that they would be taking over. But even after looking that night, Rainier was still nowhere to be found.
And so then, the next day, that was really sad, basically being like, okay, we gotta go. Headed down the mountainside. As we're coming down the mountain, more and more of these search parties were coming up, like military guys, because the school where I was working was a direct dependent of the government. So this was like a different deal than if it had been like another type of school. And so they're coming up, and we're heading down. And it's still a long hike, From there back to the base was like 8 hours or something. And then I remember, you kind of come out of the last leg of the trail back to La Cienega. And that's where it really got crazy. The director of the school's there. All the higher administration of the school's there. Tons of big-time generals are there from the military. And it was immediately, covered in mud, from this hike out and stinking and whatever. From whatever, how many days, 4 days, I guess we'd been up there. And it was immediately, okay, into the interview room with this general who's in charge of the search parties. We debriefed. We told him everything that we knew, all the facts, and that's it. And I honestly, I don't know if I've ever felt quite so, I just felt heartbroken, to be honest with you.
Ekow realized he had no further role at the mountain and headed back to school with his colleagues to wait. I had to ask him.
Yeah, we all thought he was dead. Or something. I mean, you kind of go back and forth. Oh, this is definitely what happened. Yeah, it's very strange. And, you can already feel your mind trying to rationalize the scenario and put the guilt off. Oh, this is what happened. Oh, he's definitely somewhere with his girlfriend, or who knows what. He's a really smart kid. How could you possibly get lost? So all these things are kind of rolling through my mind. Eventually, they found him.
They found him?
They found him.
How many days later?
I guess it was day 5.
He was out there for 5 days?
5 days, yeah.
Well, how'd he survive?
I guess he said he survived eating guavas. I never saw the direct coordinates for where he was, but he was found by one of the hunters that was part of the search party. So it's pretty interesting. So part of the search party, in addition to the military guys, were these guys who go hunt wild pigs in the Dominican mountainside with these dogs. It's pretty wild. They're total mountain men. And he found him out there in this gully. He was just hanging out. They interviewed him on TV, and he, was sort of smiling and happy, go lucky and whatever. So that was odd.
Did you ever see him again?
Yeah, totally. He came back to school. I never really got a straight answer from him, to be honest with you. I never really got a fully straight answer. It was overall a really mind-boggling experience. And I understood at that point the real strength of community. When a group of people can really support each other despite very real challenges and tragedy. I use the word community, and I pointed to that specifically because that was a topic that folks often talk about as a great attribute to places like the DR. My dad's from Ghana, and I visited there when I was in high school, and I noticed, the community here feels great, People are friendly, people are neighborly, people will offer you coffee and welcome you into their home. And that's different from a lot of the places that I have experienced in the U.S. I'm sure some places in the U.S. do have that strong sense of community, but other places clearly do not. Before this experience, I think that I more saw community in that sense as like a cool, almost like novelty, just like something nice, like isn't this pleasant? But I think at that moment I realized that, community is about much more than pleasantries and niceties. It's about survival. Because when we were up there in the mountain, it was about how do we manage this as a group? How do we work together? How do we take care of each other? That gave me certainly a new appreciation for what that means and a new understanding of different approaches to life. I think that my knowledge, my awareness that there's a different way to live makes it harder to live in the daily grind. That the focus of my energy does not have to be towards progress in every moment and achievement. That the focus of your energy can also be spent in cultivating relationships and being in a place. And then that's a perfectly valid and valuable way for individuals and for groups of people to live. And many people do live that way. That was for sure a major takeaway for me. I think that before you really travel, before you experience another culture, I think it's easy to assume that the place where you're from is like the baseline. This is what existence is, and everything else is just different in comparison to this existence. And I think it takes a while for it to really click in your brain, like, no, that's not true. I remember one day, specifically, I was sitting out where I lived on this beautiful hillside in the DR, and I had this awesome neighbor, Miaya, amazing woman. She would always make coffee and welcome me in, and she was so kind, and she was just an amazing cook, and had this deep laugh. I just really looked up to her and respected her, and we developed like a really deep relationship. And one day, I didn't have classes to teach. I didn't have any specific job to do. I walked out and I saw Miaya just sitting there kind of feeding her chicken. She's like, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, I'm going to go to the school and see if I can, follow up on something or whatever. I just had a moment, and I was just looking at her, and I was like, man, it's like just Tuesday. It's just a beautiful Tuesday afternoon, and she's here just enjoying this day, and the sun's coming down, and I'm off to hop on my bicycle and go to sit in the library, and it's like, what happened that I can't enjoy a beautiful Tuesday afternoon when it's here for me to enjoy?
Did you stay or did you go?
I stayed.
Good.
I was great. The breeze was coming over the hill. It was awesome. Yeah, oh man. Best spot in the world right there.
If you've listened to our first season, you know Ekow as our host. It is with excitement for him that I tell you, our listeners, that he is moving on from EF Outbound to pursue new adventures. And I don't know about you, but I can't wait to hear what stories he comes back with.
EF Outbound is brought to you by EF Education First, the world leader in international education. This episode was hosted and produced by Meg Martineau with help by me, Shelby Elatmani, and sound designed by Billy Woraznik. For more information on the podcast, head over to ef.com/podcast, and if you like what you hear, don't forget to subscribe. If you want to share your own transformative travel story, email us at outbound@ef.com.